There's a saying, be careful who you trust, especially the people who smile the widest, the ones who stand closest to you. They are often the ones waiting for you to fail. They want to see you fall. I know this better than anyone. I learned it the hardest way possible. I had a friend. Her name was Sarah. She was my shadow for years. We built an incredible life together, a life most people only dream about. She was my confidant. I trusted her with every secret, every dream. But Sarah was not a friend. She was a poison, a parasite living in my light. While I was succeeding, she was whispering. She was carefully, slowly destroying me. She poisoned my reputation with lies. She wanted my world, and she took it. I lost everything, my business, my fiancée, my home, all because of her. I fell into a deep, dark hole. I thought I would never crawl out, but I did. And I spent 5 years planning, 5 years working in the dark, waiting for my moment. And then, one day, the universe handed me the ultimate weapon. I became her new landlord. My name is Michael. This story starts about 15 years ago. Back then, everything was perfect, absolutely golden. I was in my late 20s. I was living the high life. I wasn't born rich. I earned it. I built a technology company from nothing. By the time I was 30, the company was booming. We specialized in mobile applications, cutting-edge stuff, the kind of business that moves fast. I was listed in all the 30 under 30s lists. I had the penthouse apartment, the vintage car, the whole package. People envied my life. They looked at me and saw success, unstoppable momentum. And standing right next to me for almost all of it was Sarah. I met Sarah in college. We were roommates for a while. She was smart, very charming. She had this incredible ability to make everyone feel special, like they were the only person in the room. When I started my business, she was my first supporter. She helped me with the initial marketing ideas. She wasn't an official employee, but she was always around. As the company grew, she started managing our public relations. It was the perfect role for her. She was the face of the company at all the parties. She networked like a machine. She was excellent at keeping our name in the right places. People loved her. They trusted her. And I trusted her completely. She was family. I saw her as the sister I never had. We were inseparable. Weekends were spent together. We took big vacations together, skiing in the Alps, sailing in the Mediterranean. She was always on my speed dial. She knew all the details of my life, the good, the bad, and the slightly embarrassing. I never kept anything from her. Why would I? She was Sarah. She was loyal. Or so I thought. Around this time, I met Jessica. Jessica was stunning. More than just beautiful. She was grounded. She was a landscape architect. She didn't care about my money or the fancy cars. She cared about the real me, the guy who liked quiet evenings and bad sci-fi movies. We fell hard and fast. She was the one. I knew it almost instantly. Within 18 months, I bought the ring. A massive 3-carat diamond. I planned a huge proposal. I told Sarah about it first. I showed her the ring. I explained the whole plan. I was bouncing off the walls with excitement. She was genuinely happy for me. She hugged me tight. She told me I deserved all the happiness in the world. Jessica and I set a wedding date. We planned a destination wedding in Italy. The venue was booked. The guest list was finalized. Sarah was my best man, or rather, my honorary man of honor. She was managing a lot of the logistics, coordinating the travel, dealing with the vendors. She took so much stress off my plate. She was truly the perfect friend. My life felt like one of those movies. The successful career, the beautiful, loving fiancé, the loyal, supportive best friend. I was sitting on top of the world. I remember thinking one afternoon, as I looked out over the city from my penthouse, I have everything. I am truly blessed. That feeling of perfection? It was the calm before the storm, the highest point right before the sharpest drop. Because while I was busy celebrating my life, Sarah was busy watching it, not supporting it, watching it. She wasn't just observing, she was measuring. She was cataloging every single piece of my golden life, and she was calculating how to make it hers. She was waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike. The cracks were already forming, and I was too blind to see them. I was too wrapped up in the glow of my success and my love for Jessica to notice the dark shadow I was inviting into the core of my world. The first real crack appeared about 6 months before the wedding. It was tiny, insignificant. At the time, I just brushed it off. I chalked it up to stress. Wedding planning is tough. Running a huge company is tough. I figured we were all running on fumes. Jessica had been spending a lot of time with Sarah. They were doing the bridal things, tasting cakes, looking at flowers. They were bonding, which I loved. But sometimes Jessica would seem distant. She'd look at me strangely, like she was waiting for me to admit something. I remember one night very clearly. We were having dinner. Jessica put her fork down. She looked right at me. She asked me a question that completely blindsided me. She asked, "Michael, why did you tell Sarah you weren't sure about moving to the suburbs?" I was confused. I was absolutely set on buying a house outside the city. It was our big dream. We had spent months looking at properties. "What are you talking about, Jess? I never said that. I'm completely sure." Jessica paused. She picked at her food. "Well, Sarah said you mentioned you felt trapped by the idea. She said you thought it was too soon to settle down, that you were considering backing out of the purchase." It was a total lie. I immediately got defensive. I told Jessica that Sarah must have misunderstood. Maybe she was confused about a different conversation. I defended Sarah instantly. I told Jessica, "Sarah is just trying to help. Maybe she misheard me talking about a business deal." Jessica accepted it. She seemed to relax. But a seed of doubt was planted. Not about Sarah, but about me. Why would Sarah say something like that? It made no sense. It was unnecessary friction. Then it started happening at the office too. Little things. We had a huge meeting with a potential investor group. A very important group. Sarah was responsible for getting all the presentation materials ready. She was the best at it. The morning of the presentation, the files were corrupted, completely unusable. We had to scramble for 2 hours to rebuild everything. I nearly lost the deal. It was a close call. Sarah was devastated. She apologized profusely. She blamed the new junior IT guy. She said he messed with the cloud server. I believed her. Why wouldn't I? Sarah was meticulous. She was the one who always kept everything organized. She even went and fired the junior guy herself. She said, "We can't have this level of incompetence, Michael. Not with what you've built." Looking back, these weren't accidents. These were subtle attacks. Sarah was starting to chip away at my foundation. She was slowly eroding my trust with Jessica. She was making me look incompetent at work. She was creating chaos, then stepping in to fix it. It was classic manipulation. I was too blind, too loyal, and too busy to see the pattern. I was riding high on my own success. I saw my life through rose-colored glasses. I saw Sarah through the same lens. I saw her as my protector. I should have seen her as my greatest threat. The biggest mistake I made was ignoring those tiny red flags. I kept explaining away her behavior. I kept defending her. I told myself she was just stressed. I told myself she was just clumsy. I never considered the darker possibility. The idea that my best friend was actively working against me was unthinkable. It wasn't until everything fell apart that I finally understood the truth. That sometimes the simplest explanation is also the most brutal one. The subtle cracks quickly became a chasm. The pressure started building everywhere. At home, Jessica was becoming withdrawn. She was constantly asking me about things I had supposedly said. Arguments started over small things. We went from planning our future happily to constantly defending our past decisions. She mentioned money often. "Sarah said you took a huge, risky loan out for the new office." Sarah asked if we were going to need a prenup because of how unstable the company is. Total nonsense. My company was never more stable. I felt like I was living in a gaslight nightmare. At the office, the friction increased. Major clients were suddenly pulling out of long-standing deals. They wouldn't give a clear reason. They just said, "We heard some things," or "We decided to go in a different direction." My reputation, which I had spent years polishing, felt like it was covered in mud. I called an emergency meeting with my senior team. I asked them what was going on. Why were we hemorrhaging clients? My COO, a guy named David, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He looked nervous. He was the first to speak the truth. David said, "Michael, I don't know how to tell you this, but Sarah has been very active. She's been telling people that the company is financially unstable. She's been saying that you are burning through capital too fast, that the wedding is costing too much." I laughed. A sharp, disbelieving laugh. "David, that's insane. Sarah manages our PR. She's my best friend. She would never sabotage us." David looked me dead in the eye. "Michael, she's been pitching clients to our competitors. She's been taking meetings behind your back. She tells them you're a genius, but a liability. She paints herself as the stable, controlled alternative, the person who really runs the day-to-day." The blood drained out of my face. I felt physically sick. I pushed David further. I demanded proof. He pulled out his phone. He showed me emails, email chains between Sarah and our competitor's head of sales, pitches that included confidential financial information about my company, information only I, David, and Sarah had access to. It was all there, undeniable. She wasn't just sabotaging me. She was actively trying to take the company. She was laying the groundwork to stage a hostile takeover, or at least sink the ship so she could swim away with the best parts. She had poisoned the well so thoroughly that clients were afraid to even answer my calls. I immediately confronted her. I called her into my office. I showed her the emails. I didn't yell. I was too stunned. I just looked at her. "Why, Sarah? Why would you do this?" She didn't deny it. She didn't even apologize. She did something much worse. She shrugged. She sat back in the leather chair. She looked completely calm, almost bored. She said very quietly, "Because you had everything, Michael, and I had nothing. I built you up. I stood beside you, but I was always your shadow. You got the praise, you got the girl, you got the money. I was just the helpful, supportive friend. I got tired of waiting for my turn." She told me she had been planting the seeds of doubt for over a year. She admitted that she corrupted the investor presentation files. She admitted that she fabricated the stories to Jessica. She wasn't just trying to hurt me. She wanted to erase me. The betrayal hit me like a physical punch. This wasn't a business enemy. This was the person I trusted with my life. I fired her on the spot. I had security escort her out of the building. She left without a single word of remorse. She just smiled. A chilling, satisfied smile. That day was the beginning of the end. Once the true story got out, that the PR manager had been actively leaking information and undermining the CEO, the company spiraled. The betrayal confirmed all the rumors Sarah had started. Investors panicked. Jessica, who was already on edge, saw the chaos and the stress. She saw the headlines. She thought the foundation of our life was built on sand. Within 6 weeks, the wedding was called off. Jessica couldn't handle the stress and the constant lies. She said she didn't know who I was anymore. She didn't know what to believe. She left. Within 3 months, I was forced to sell the company at a fraction of its value. I lost my penthouse. I lost my reputation. The golden life everyone envied was gone, reduced to ash by the person I loved like a sister. I was 33, completely broke and utterly alone. I hit rock bottom fast. The fall was spectacular and humiliating. One day I was reading my name in Forbes. The next, I was reading about my bankruptcy in the local paper. I moved out of the penthouse. I sold the vintage car. I ended up renting a tiny, depressing apartment far away from the city center. I was paralyzed by shock and grief. It wasn't just the money, it was the absolute demolition of my reality. The fact that the person closest to me had spent years playing a long con game. It broke something inside me. For 6 months, I barely left the apartment. I drank too much coffee. I watched too much bad television. I was a ghost. My friends mostly disappeared. The fair weather kind vanished immediately. The genuine ones tried to help, but I pushed them away. I was too ashamed, too angry. And Sarah? She landed on her feet. Of course she did. She took the information she stole, the contacts she cultivated, and the reputation she maintained. She joined a small, aggressive competitor of my old company. Within a year, she was VP of strategy. The tech world is cynical. They saw her as ruthless, not a traitor. They rewarded her ambition. She was succeeding, using the ruins of my life as her ladder. One morning, I was staring at my reflection, haggard, defeated. I realized something important. I had allowed her to win completely. She didn't just take my stuff, she took my spirit. That was the moment I snapped out of it. The sadness turned into a cold, focused rage. I decided I was not going to be a victim anymore. I was going to fight back. Not with business deals, but with patience, with planning. I knew I couldn't rebuild my old company. That was impossible. I needed a new identity, a complete reset, and I needed to be close to Sarah. Not as a friend, but as a silent observer. My plan was simple. I needed to build a new empire, quietly. An empire Sarah would never connect back to Michael, the tech wunderkind. I used the small amount of cash I had salvaged from the sale, less than 10% of my former worth, and I started investing in something boring, something stable, real estate. I didn't buy luxury condos. I bought distressed properties, small, multifamily homes in neighborhoods, far from the tech world. I spent 2 years getting my hands dirty. I learned plumbing, I learned carpentry, I became a landlord, a maintenance guy, an anonymous worker. I wore old jeans and smelled like paint thinner. No one recognized me. The public face of Michael, the millionaire, was dead. This new guy was just Mike, the property manager. It was hard, grinding work, but it was therapeutic. Every hammer swing was a release of the anger I held for Sarah. Slowly, painstakingly, I built a portfolio of low-risk properties. I was making money again. Not the explosive tech money, but slow, steady, foundational wealth. My operation was so small and localized, it was completely off Sarah's radar. I lived modestly. Every extra dollar went back into buying another building. I became obsessed with property management, taxes, and zoning laws. I turned myself into a ghost in the machine, a quiet, diligent worker. My goal wasn't just to get rich again. My goal was to intersect with Sarah's life at the exact moment of her weakness. I knew she was living large, the VP salary, the fancy lifestyle. People like Sarah, who operate on pure ego, always overspend. They assume the high times will last forever. I was counting on that flaw. I was building a solid base. She was building a house of cards. I just needed to wait until her cards started to wobble. And then I would strike. I was planning the ultimate slow burn karma. I had the patience of a saint and the memory of an elephant. 5 years passed. 5 years of anonymity. 5 years of pouring concrete and fixing leaky faucets. My property portfolio grew steadily. I owned nearly a dozen small apartment buildings across the greater metro area. My net worth was creeping back up, built on bricks and mortar, not lines of code. Sarah, meanwhile, was on her victory tour. I kept tabs on her casually, social media mostly. She was constantly posting pictures of expensive trips, designer clothes. She bought a massive, trendy townhouse near the city center. She was still the golden girl, the successful executive. She had clearly forgotten all about the wreckage she left behind. That was her second mistake. Her first was betraying me. Her second was underestimating my memory. Then came the first twist. It wasn't planned. It was pure, beautiful luck. I was looking to acquire a new property, a 5-unit building in a nice but slightly fading part of town. The property needed serious work, but the location was prime. I put in an offer. It was accepted quickly. I closed the deal a few weeks later. I was getting the tenant files ready, preparing for the transition. I was sitting at my desk, organizing the lease agreements. I picked up one file. The name on the lease stopped my heart completely. The tenant in Unit 3B was listed as Sarah J. Peterson. My Sarah. The very same person. It couldn't be a coincidence. Her full name, her signature. She was renting an apartment in a building I just bought. My initial shock immediately transformed into a deep, chilling thrill. The universe had delivered her right into my hands. I didn't have to plan a complex trap. She walked right into my property. But why was the successful VP renting? I did some digging. Quietly. It turned out that Sarah's spending had far outpaced her massive salary. She had bought that massive townhouse, but she had leveraged herself to the max. She took out a huge, interest-only mortgage. When the tech sector briefly stumbled a year earlier, her company had frozen bonuses and cut benefits. She was house-rich, but cash-poor. She was bleeding money trying to maintain her lifestyle. So she had rented out her huge, expensive townhouse, for a decent profit, sure, and downsized to a small 5-unit rental apartment to save cash and pay down her debt. She was living in secret austerity while projecting an image of opulence on Instagram. She was hiding the truth. This was phase 1 of my revenge. The quiet entry. She had no idea who her new landlord was. The property management company I used was a shell LLC. I didn't manage the day-to-day. I used a third-party management service. I was completely invisible to her. I spent the next 2 months observing. I had the property management company send me every detail, every maintenance request, every communication. I watched her life through the keyhole of a rental file. She was demanding. She complained constantly. The heating was too loud. The carpet needed replacing. She demanded immediate responses to every small issue. She was treating the building manager, my employee, like a personal servant. She was still the entitled, demanding Sarah I knew, only now she was a tenant, not an executive. I started preparing for the next step. I told my property manager that I, the new owner, was going to take over direct management of this specific building. I told them I wanted to optimize the operations. The manager shrugged. They didn't care. They got paid either way. The time had come to step out of the shadows. The time for the first official contact. I sent a formal notice to all tenants in the building. It was a simple letter on professional letterhead. It stated that the ownership had changed and that all future communication regarding rent, maintenance, and lease renewals would be handled directly by the new owner, Michael R. Henderson. I knew that seeing my name on that letter would hit her like a lightning bolt, and I was going to be waiting. The next day, my phone rang. It was the property manager. They sounded frantic. "Sir, I think you should take this call. Tenant 3B. She's demanding to speak to you. She's hysterical." I told the manager to transfer the call directly to my personal line. I answered professionally. "This is Michael Henderson. How can I help you?" The line was silent for a full 5 seconds. Then, a sharp gasp. It was Sarah. Her composure was gone. "Michael, is this really you? What kind of joke is this? Why is your name on this letterhead?" Her voice was trembling. The powerful VP executive was dissolving into panic. I kept my voice low, calm, businesslike. "Ms. Peterson, this is not a joke. I am the sole owner of 417 Elm Street. I purchased the building 2 months ago. You are currently my tenant. This is impossible. You lost everything. You went bankrupt. You were living in a hole," she stammered. The arrogance was replaced by fear. People rebuild, Sarah. Some of us do it quietly. Now, what seems to be the issue? Is this regarding a maintenance request? I wasn't there to gloat yet. I was there to establish the new reality. She ignored the question. "You bought this building just to get to me. What are you going to do?" "I bought the building because it was a sound financial investment, Ms. Peterson. Your presence here is simply a very convenient coincidence. Now, if you are calling to discuss the leaky faucet you reported last week, I need you to confirm your availability for a repair visit tomorrow." I refused to give her the emotional reaction she was looking for. I treated her like any other demanding tenant. It drove her absolutely mad. The power dynamic had flipped entirely. I was the property owner. She was the leaseholder. She was dependent on me for her shelter. She hung up on me, furious. I smiled. Phase 2 was activated. The goal wasn't just to be her landlord. The goal was to use the legal framework of tenancy to apply maximum pressure. I knew her biggest vulnerability, her image. She was constantly posting from her townhouse, pretending she was still living the opulent life. I waited 1 week. Then I initiated the nuclear twist. I sent a formal, certified letter to Sarah and every other tenant in the building. It was a notice of non-renewal. I was not evicting her now. That would be too quick, too loud. I was simply notifying her that when her current lease expired in 90 days, it would not be renewed. The reason? Owner is planning extensive, necessary renovations and is taking the units offline. A perfectly legal routine reason in the real estate world. For the other tenants, it was an inconvenience. For Sarah, it was a catastrophe. Because I knew that her expensive townhouse rental agreement required her to move back into the property within 6 months of the end of her current tenancy, or she would face massive financial penalties from her own tenants. She was trapped. She needed this apartment for another year to stabilize her finances. Losing the small, cheap apartment meant she would have to pay a fortune to break her lease on the house she wasn't living in. The call I got after that letter was not frantic, it was broken. She called me, pleading, "Michael, please, you know I can't move in 90 days. I'll lose everything. The penalties, my finances are tied up in the house rental. Please, I'll pay more rent. Just extend it." "I'm sorry, Miss Peterson," I said, still calm. "The renovation schedule is firm. You will need to vacate the premises by the end of your lease term. I have already consulted with my legal team. The notice is valid. You have 90 days to find new accommodations." I had her. The woman who poisoned my reputation and stole my life was now begging me to let her stay in the small apartment she used to hide her financial failure. The next 3 months were torture for Sarah and pure satisfaction for me. She tried everything. She sent me desperate emails, recounting our old friendship. She tried to appeal to my guilt. She even tried to bribe me, offering large sums of cash to rescind the non-renewal notice. I refused every single attempt. I wasn't doing anything illegal. I was following every landlord-tenant law to the letter. I was simply an incredibly difficult landlord. I found every tiny violation of her lease, a forgotten pet, unauthorized satellite dish installation, and sent formal warnings. I treated her with cold, impersonal professionalism. She couldn't lash out or sabotage me. She would just be digging her own grave faster. She was entirely powerless. As the 90-day deadline approached, her facade completely crumbled. The stress was immense. She couldn't find a suitable, immediate replacement for her rental situation. She was forced to tell her tenants that she would be moving back into her luxury townhouse early, triggering the massive penalty clause she had feared. She lost her renters. She had to pay them a huge settlement, and she was forced back into a townhouse she couldn't afford, with no income coming in from the rent and the enormous, interest-only mortgage looming. The financial pressure she had been running from slammed into her. On the final day of her lease, I drove to the building myself. Not as Michael, the landlord, but as Mike, the maintenance guy. I wanted to see it with my own eyes. She was outside, watching the moving truck pull away. She looked terrible, gaunt. She saw me approaching and recognized me instantly, even in my faded work clothes. She walked up to me, her eyes burning with pure hatred. "You did this. You ruined me, Michael. You're vindictive. You're a monster." I looked at her calmly. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to yell. The silence carried the weight of 5 years of waiting. "Sarah," I said, 5 years ago you took my fiancée, my company, and my home. You didn't just ruin me. You did it with a smile while pretending to be my friend. You poisoned every single relationship I had. And you did it for greed." I paused, letting her feel the full gravity of the moment. "I didn't ruin you, Sarah. I just followed the law. You made bad business decisions, and I took advantage of them. That's what business is, right? You taught me that lesson yourself. She tried to argue, but I cut her off. I pulled out my phone. I sent a final email to my lawyer, confirming the notification to file for permanent vacancy status on her unit. I looked her in the eye one last time. I delivered the line I had been rehearsing in my head for 5 years. Now, get off my property. She was forced to turn around and walk away from the apartment, leaving her last stable financial anchor behind. The karma was complete. She was back in the huge, empty house she couldn't afford, having destroyed her own financial stability by sacrificing long-term solvency for short-term image. The world she built on lies was collapsing. And me? I watched her go. I felt no joy, just peace. The debt was paid. I finally closed that chapter. My new life was built on bedrock, the kind of foundation that Sarah could never touch again. If you think my revenge was deserved, hit that like button. Have you ever had a friend turn into a landlord? Tell me your betrayal stories in the comments below, and subscribe if you want to hear more stories of legendary long game karma. I'll see you in the next one.